Before we begin, I would like to make a disclaimer informing you that this video is going to show dead bodies. Not real ones, just video game dead bodies, and they're going to be going through an embalming process. So if that makes you icky-sicky, don't watch this video. As for the game itself, though I don't show it, it features themes of self-harm, themes of suicide, and definitely a lot of themes about the paranormal. So if that bothers you, also don't watch this video. Also, there are chapters below the video, hopefully that they're here this time. They might not be, they usually aren't. So they're in the description nonetheless, so look there if you're looking for something specific. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. Hello and hi and howdy and hello. It's me, Super Dude, and I'd have something I'd like to clarify. In the modern horror history video, there are a scant few comments that essentially break down to AAA horror, not spooky indie horror, where it's at. And I'm honestly inclined to agree. AAA horror games have this special little modifier to the difficulty of making them where they need to make money. A lot of money. Dead Space 2 reportedly cost $60 million to make, though we aren't for sure because we've never been given solid numbers. Having sold 4 million copies since 2017 means Dead Space 2 grossed at least $240 million. That is 4 times the cost of the game, so all that top money should be gravy, right? Well, no. There are advertising budgets, publishers take a cut of the money, everyone has to be paid, and GameStops have to make an amount of profit off of the sale as well, or else how will the GameStops continue to exist? That $60 is sliced up multiple ways before it gets back to the publisher, and that publisher then looks at the developer and says, "Not enough money, dead game," tosses it. Again, that's 4 times the cost of the game, deemed a financial failure. So AAA horror needs to get butts into seats. Being a not terribly scary game with horror aesthetics is one way to achieve that. Lowers the bar to entry. Indie games, though? They aren't so concerned with that. Obviously, all video games want to make a profit. No one's passing out free food and healthcare, so we all gotta make money. It's just that indie games have a much smaller team, typically, and less people that are waiting for their slice of the game's profit, so their profit margins are larger. This means indie games, as a whole, are riskier in what they try to pull off, but also make their money back easier. Less hands of the ball, less people riding on what they're hoping is a successful game launch. Not saying that doesn't happen, of course. The Cuphead developer double mortgaged his house to finance that thing. A lot rides on game production, no matter the scale, but that scale means that 25 people depended on Cuphead's success, and the amount of people who depended on Dead Space 2's was orders of magnitude more. I say depended in quotes because the company just ate the loss. That's what big companies can do. They act like it's a big deal, but it isn't as long as some of their products succeed. What was I saying? Right, AAA horror, as a class of horror, isn't all that scary. It's not their central priority. For some real scares, we have to enter the indie horror space. Hey, you horror junkies out there, I got something for you. The Mortuary Assistant is a game that came out in 2022, developed by Darkstone Digital. I have not played any of their other stuff, but their other games review positively, so maybe check them out. The Mortuary Assistant has you going to the Mortician for an interview as their assistant, hence the name. You're conducting your interview when strange happenings start occurring during the process. Your would-be boss cancels the interview on the spot, leaving your character concerned that they did something wrong. You are then called by the Mortician, and he asks you to come to work right away, in the middle of the night, to take care of some bodies for him. And from there, the game begins. To you horror junkies, go play this, have fun. But for the rest of you, who are perhaps interested in talking about game design, I would like to talk about how the Mortuary Assistant scares you. Because it goes about doing so in a really interesting way that may seem familiar to those who have played other types of games. The gameplay loop of the Mortuary Assistant consists of you going to work and going about successfully embalming 3 different cadavers for the night. There are only so many slots in your inventory to hold things, and the item locations change each time you boot up the game, so you have to internalize where what you need is when you need it. You then go about your tasks on these uncomfortably anatomical models. They're very uncanny valley. Be careful as you go about your duties, though, because there are other creatures in the office besides you and the bodies. Inside of one of these corpses is a demon, which is currently in the process of possessing you. The Mortician noticed the signs of possession during the interview and set up this night to give you a fighting chance at repelling the devil. As the night progresses, spooky things will happen, and will try to prevent your embalming procedures and obfuscate which body holds the beast in question. It is up to you to discover the demon's name, look for signs of which body hides the true specter, create a seal so it can't escape its current container, and destroy it. All in all, each game lasts about 20 minutes as the tension ratchets up and you go about deducing who the who the demon is. And you complete your various tasks to wait for something to happen so you can see who the Wait a minute. Oh my god, is this just... Among Us, hereafter referred to as Amogus, is an online social deduction game that came out in 2018. Maybe you've heard of it. It got pretty popular when we were all stuck inside during that one thing. Among Us is a riff to Mafia, Werewolf, or other games of the social deduction genre. Hallmarks include a hidden rule that only a scant few are aware of, and that lying is necessary for the game to function. In a typical social deduction game, there's a period of action where players make decisions, then a period of deduction, where players must determine who the odd one out is and successfully remove them from play. It is here where the true game is afoot, as the hidden player tries to bluff, deflect, or bribe their way through suspicion and get to a point near the end of the game where they are too powerful to be stopped by the other players, and can thus destroy them handily. How does Amogus mix things up in this genre? In the normal action phase of these types of games, the action is kind of just putting down what you want to do or choosing one from a menu of options. It's not very active, is it? Amogus decided to make the action phase a level, which you must move around inside of. Crew members move about the station, whilst the imposter attempts to kill them. But here's the kicker. For the crew to win, they just need to discover who the imposter is, right? Safest way to do that is to have each other's backs as you move about the station. Better yet, why don't we all just stand around the table, huh? Nowhere safer than being together, right? Wrong.
No way.
False.
Not this time.
There are two different victory conditions for the crew to succeed. One is successfully killing the imposter, which is the built-in method most social deduction games have. The second is if they manage to fill their taskbar and keep the ship operational over the course of the game. If they complete all their tasks, they win. So they must run to the disparate corners of the map and complete their tasks. This, coupled with the sabotage capabilities of the imposter, means that the most efficient strategy is off the table for the crew. This concept I just mentioned, of the players prioritizing winning over actually playing the game the way it's intended, is called optimizing the fun out of the game, and it is a well-known problem in game design. Here's a video by Game Maker's Toolkit describing the phenomenon. Tasks exist to discourage players from chasing victory at the cost of their fun. All that tasks are really is busy work, but the busy work is what allows the part of the game that matters to hit, getting snuck up on and killed, and then having to argue about who did it based on the eyewitness accounts of who found the body and where everyone else was on the map. How does this connect to the Mortuary Assistant? Well, what you're doing here is essentially the same in that you're trying to discover which of the bodies is the real danger. What's to stop you from just staring at them and waiting to see them stir? Well, for one, you can't actually burn the bodies in the end unless they're fully embalmed. For two, the letters in the demon's name only appear after a certain amount of work is done, so you have to do some of your tasks to progress. And third, certain tasks prime the demon to act, forcing the body to move. Your tasks coincide with the best evidence you have to determine which body stores the true beast. The tasks also perform another function, and that's priming you for the scares. Since this is a horror game, there are actually two ways to optimize the fun out of the experience. The first I've already mentioned, just staring at the bodies and waiting. The other is this. Perhaps you've seen this before. Someone closing their eyes and letting the scare wash over them. They're basically avoiding being scared, which at least in some small way defeats the purpose of playing the game. Just want to clarify that it's fine if you do that. Scares are essentially a biological function and you can't control how you respond. So if you respond by closing your eyes, that's fine. No judgment at all. But it is optimizing the fun out in a sense. You are actively looking away from the reason why you're playing the game. So when designers make games, one of the things that they could think about is, how do we make sure that they don't do that? Through the busy work of completing your tasks, you move through various rooms, collect materials to perform certain functions, and in some cases you have your hands completely taken up performing some operation on the body. You're engaging with some minigame right now, which means you have your eye on the ball. And it is in that moment that the game decides to scare you. There's no opportunity to look away in the Mortuary Assistant. You are running against a possession clock, and you have to embalm these bodies. If you are too precious with your time, the scares only become more frequent, more invasive, more destructive to your ability to work or think. You better be quick so that you can get through this quickly, but that paradoxically makes you more primed for the jumps when they occur. It's a fantastic way to condition the player so that they cannot escape the scares. And the scares? Ooh, the scares are good in this game. The way that games go about scaring you is an art all its own, and there are multiple avenues you could take to get the desired effect. You have games like Amnesia, where jump scares happen less than just existing in a space that fills you with dread, what I called horror vibes in the modern horror history video. This is a slow cook type of horror, where the tension rises slowly over the course of the game. You also have aggressive, loud horror, where the tension is sliced through with screams, blood, and shrieking violins. Dead Space 1 and 2 are champions of this style of horror in my mind. Jump scares exist independently of this dichotomy. Slow cook or high tension both have to crescendo into something, and an easy answer for how to complete that arc is with a jump scare. But jump scares are quite tricky to get right and will lose their effectiveness over time, so it's a tool best used sparingly. The Mortuary Assistant lies closer to this edge of the dichotomy, but as the night slowly progresses, it works its way towards the high tension as the sounds of the office choke the air and the demon gets closer and closer to possession. It has something akin to The Director, first championed by Left 4 Dead, where the game is crafting a horror experience in the background as you aren't looking. In this cramped office space, that means every time you turn away, something could be changing behind you. Various creatures could be hiding in corners you never look, and that's how the horror operates here. It's subtle, and to catch the scares requires intimacy with the space. As an example, I was playing this game while some of my friends were watching on Discord. I was inputting information into the computer and then stepped away to do something else when I saw something on the ceiling. The overhead lamp, which is the major source of light in this room, casts a shadow onto the ceiling. Just a line, but this time, attached to that line was a person. A being cloaked completely in shadow, as if they were of the shadow itself, holding close to the bar. As I saw them, they scampered down the bar shadow and out the window. This entire interaction was less than a second, and I jumped out of my skin. No one else noticed, because no one else was paying as much attention as I was. No one was required to know the locations of the items needed. No one needed to observe the bodies as closely as I did. So no one was so primed to see such a strange detail. It could have just been a flicker of the lights for all they knew, or I knew, and that's not uncommon in most horror games. That is what makes this game special in its horror presentation. For me alone, it completely got me. And that's only because it had made me ready to see that. If you want a more distilled visual representation of what I'm talking about here, this is a video made by Moog, which is just a collation of a bunch of streamers playing the Mortuary Assistant and their reaction to this particular type of scare that the game champions. So give it a look if you're into it. And also, it's just fun to see this sort of thing. So yeah, I encourage you to see it if you would like. The tasks you're performing, coupled with the need to watch the body closely, cause you to internalize the space of this rather small office, which the game turns back on you to hide scares in corners and in walls. And that's only in the early night. It gets worse as the night keeps going, and some events are so powerful that they drag you out of the normal gameplay loop and place you in a different game entirely. Some of these flesh out you or the Mortician's characters and backstories, and yet others are small scripted moments that arrest your control for a moment. Two of my favorite are the ones where your grandmother is outside at the window, asking you to let her in, and the hallway which slowly closes in on you until you're faced with a jump scare. Not all these work in being scary outside of the biological reaction most have the jump scares. I actually found myself laughing at that last one after it was over, but it communicates the demon's growing control over your faculties. At first it was jump devils in the corner of your vision, but now it's surrounding you, taking your eyes and your ears, making you see people you care about or pulling you away from the mortuary entirely. As you craft the seal for the body and place the crest, the demon taunts you for the final time as you prepare to destroy it, and then... the game ends. The game is only the one night, and booting it up again replaces you into a new light that doesn't look much different from your first. I'm not sure if the game's multiple endings are like story progression, or if you actually have to commit to different actions in the night to get the various endings. I know there's a deeper story to this, some of the longer possession segments make that clear. It's just that how it structures itself makes that confusing for me. Is this a story where I'm booted into the main menu every time, or what's happening here? I don't know. There are plenty of videos out there that are explaining how to get every single ending, so I'm sure that this is not a confusion which is specific to me. If you're planning on going for everything, I recommend playing the game a couple of times and then just going with one of these. It would make it a lot easier than just bumbling around in the dark like I did. Overall, though, this is a really great horror game where the task system forces you to learn the space intimately, which primes you for some really good horror moments, as well as making the most unfun but efficient strategies non-starters. It was really funny to me how the task system of Amogus has warped into what we're seeing here, but it works really well, and for any who are really into horror, you should try this game out. And if you aren't, watch a stream of it or something. This game deserves more recognition for what it gets right. As I said at the beginning of the video, truly scary horror games, the ones that are able to experiment. And this one, I think, is a really interesting one of those, and a success at that. I hope you give it a try, or watch someone if you can't handle the jumps. No judgment. Conclusion time, even though this video is probably my shortest yet, but some of y'all have terrible attention spans, so truly scary horror games are often not found in the AAA space due to their desire to make the most money possible. True innovation happens in the indie space, where the subject of this video comes from. The Mortuary Assistant structure is quite similar to Amogus, in that you must perform busy work in order to progress through the game. For both games mentioned, this busy work serves to stop players from getting in the way of their own fun, and in Mortuary Assistant's case, forces you to get intimate with the setting, priming you for some really subtle scares. I am Super Dude, thanks for watching. Howdy, and thank you for watching the video. Some quick recommendations. I already mentioned Game Maker's Toolkit's video on the subject of players optimizing the fun out of the game. That's a really good video. You should watch it. And if you're a game designer, that's absolutely something that you're going to have to think about. So give it a look and see what other people did. We already talked about what the people in both Among Us and the Mortuary Assistant's case did. They did the same thing, which is interesting given that they're two very distinct genres, which is why I talked about it. There's also Moog's video, which is a distillation of what's happened here. Finally, I have a video by Errant Signal, which is, well, talking about this game. They're a bit of a taste maker in various video games, so I recommend you check out all of their stuff and see what sort of games might interest you there. But other than that, thank you again for watching. I have a Twitch. I don't have anything else. I am a private person. But yeah, thank you all, and I will see you when I do.